My wife said she was working late, but I followed her into a hotel room she didn't know I knew about. My name is James, and I'm 38 years old. I run a small construction company in Phoenix, Arizona. Built it from nothing over 12 years, working 16-hour days, bleeding into concrete and steel until I had something worth calling mine. I thought my wife Mary understood that. I thought she respected the sacrifice it took to build something real in this world. I was wrong. The first sign came on a Tuesday in March. Mary said she had to work late at the marketing firm where she was an account manager. Nothing unusual there. Her job had irregular hours, client dinners, campaign launches that ran past midnight. I'd gotten used to eating dinner alone, watching ESPN with my German Shepherd, Rex, while Mary handled whatever crisis needed her attention. But that Tuesday, something felt different. She was nervous when she told me about working late. Fidgeting with her wedding ring, avoiding eye contact. Mary had never been a good liar, and after 8 years of marriage, I could read her tells like a contractor reading blueprints. Big client presentation tomorrow, she said, already heading for the door. Don't wait up. I kissed her cheek, tasted her perfume, something new, something I'd never smelled before. Expensive. Drive safe, I said, watching her reflection in the hallway mirror as she checked her appearance one more time. After her car pulled out of the driveway, I sat on the couch with Rex, trying to focus on the game. But my mind kept circling back to that perfume, the way she dressed up for a late night at the office. Designer blouse, heels she usually saved for special occasions, makeup applied with the kind of care you don't waste on spreadsheets and PowerPoint presentations. I'm not a paranoid man. I don't check phones or follow people around like some jealous teenager. But I'm also not stupid. In construction, you learn to spot problems before they become disasters. You notice when something doesn't fit, when the foundation isn't solid, when someone's cutting corners. That night, I noticed. The late nights became a pattern. 3 times that week, twice the next. Always the same story, client emergencies, urgent deadlines, projects that couldn't wait until morning. Mary would come home after midnight, tired but wired, smelling like wine and that same expensive perfume. I started paying attention to details. The mileage on her car, too high for just driving to her office downtown. The way she guarded her phone, taking it to the bathroom, keeping it face down during dinner. The new clothes appearing in her closet, outfits I'd never seen her wear around me. On the 4th Thursday of her late-night routine, I made a decision. I was going to find out what Mary was really doing with her evenings. I told her I had a job site to check, some concrete that needed inspecting before it set. She barely looked up from her phone when I kissed her goodbye. "See you tonight," she said, already typing a message to someone. Instead of driving to any job site, I parked 3 blocks from Mary's office building and waited. Her car pulled into the parking garage at 5:47 p.m., right on schedule. I expected her to head inside, to whatever legitimate work she claimed was keeping her so busy. Instead, she sat in her car for 10 minutes, engine running, checking herself in the rearview mirror. Then she drove out the other side of the garage and headed west, toward the expensive part of town where neither of us had any business being. I followed at a distance, my F-150 hanging back in traffic, keeping at least 2 cars between us. Mary drove with purpose, taking turns like she'd made this trip before. No hesitation, no checking GPS. She knew exactly where she was going. 20 minutes later, she pulled into the valet parking at the Phoenician Resort. I'd driven past this place 1,000 times, usually on my way to job sites in Scottsdale. 5-star resort, $500 a night rooms, the kind of place where construction workers like me were invisible unless someone needed something built or fixed. Mary had never mentioned having clients there, never talked about meetings at resorts. I parked across the street, behind a landscaping truck, and watched. Mary got out of her car, handed her keys to the valet like she belonged there. She'd changed clothes since leaving the office, now wearing a black dress I'd never seen before, heels that made her legs look longer, hair styled in a way that screamed effort. She walked into the lobby like she owned the place. I sat in my truck for 30 minutes, engine off, watching the entrance. Construction work teaches you patience. Sometimes you wait hours for concrete to cure, for permits to clear, for weather to cooperate. You learn to sit still and observe, to gather information before making your move. At 7:15, a black BMW pulled up to the valet stand. The man who got out was everything I wasn't. Tall, lean, wearing a suit that probably cost more than I made in a week. Dark hair perfectly styled, watch that caught the light like a beacon announcing his wealth. He moved with the confidence of someone who'd never had to worry about making payroll or keeping workers employed through slow seasons. He walked into the hotel lobby the same way Mary had, like he belonged there. I didn't need to see them together to know. The timing, the location, the way they'd both prepared for this evening. But I waited anyway, because knowing something and proving it are two different things. An hour later, I drove home to an empty house and a German shepherd who looked at me like he understood that something fundamental had shifted in our world. Over the next 2 weeks, I did what any smart contractor would do when faced with a structural problem. I gathered information and developed a plan. I installed a GPS tracker on Mary's car. Small device, magnetic case, stuck it under her rear bumper during her morning shower. 24-hour battery life, real-time location updates sent to my phone. The kind of thing you use to keep track of expensive equipment on job sites. The tracker confirmed what I already suspected. Mary was visiting the Phoenician resort every Tuesday and Thursday evening. Same pattern, same timing. She'd leave work, drive home to change, then head to the hotel around 6:30. She'd stay until 10 or 11 p.m., then come home with stories about difficult clients and impossible deadlines. I also hired a private investigator. Rick Martinez was a former Phoenix PD detective who'd started his own firm after retiring from the force. I'd used him once before to run background checks on potential employees, guys who seemed too good to be true or had gaps in their work history. Rick was thorough, discreet, and expensive. Suspected infidelity, he said when I explained what I needed. Standard rate is $200 an hour plus expenses. Digital surveillance, photographs, detailed timeline. Usually takes 2 to 3 weeks to build a comprehensive case. How comprehensive? I asked. Comprehensive enough that if this goes to divorce court, you'll have everything you need. Rick's first report arrived 5 days later. 12 pages of documentation, timestamps, photographs, license plate numbers. Mary was having an affair with David Richardson, senior partner at Richardson & Associates, a high-end investment firm downtown. Married, 2 kids, wife who spent summers in their house in Aspen. The photographs were clinical, black and white, taken from across the street with a telephoto lens. Mary and David entering the hotel separately, leaving together, kissing in the parking garage, his hand on her back as they walked toward the elevators. But it was the last photograph that hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. Mary and David at the hotel restaurant, sitting in a corner booth, her hand covering his across the table. She was laughing at something he'd said, head thrown back, completely relaxed. It was the way she used to laugh with me, back when we were dating, before bills and mortgages and the daily grind of building a life together had worn us both down. She looked happy. Genuinely, completely happy in a way I hadn't seen in months. That night, Mary came home at 11:30 with her usual story about client demands and project deadlines. She kissed my cheek, said she was exhausted, and went straight to bed. I sat on the couch with Rick's report spread across the coffee table, studying photographs of my wife's betrayal like blueprints for a building I'd never wanted to construct. Rex put his head on my lap, sensing something was wrong. I scratched behind his ears and made a decision. I wasn't going to confront Mary. Not yet. I wasn't going to scream or throw things or demand explanations. I was going to do what I'd learned to do in construction when faced with a problem that required precision. I was going to plan, prepare, and execute with surgical accuracy. The next Tuesday, I told Mary the first had to work late myself. Emergency repair on a foundation that was showing stress fractures. She barely looked up from her phone when I explained. Of course, she said. I'll probably be late too. Big presentation tomorrow. I kissed her goodbye and drove to the Phoenician resort. This time, I didn't park across the street. I drove right up to the valet stand, handed over my keys like I belonged there, and walked into the lobby wearing the one good suit I owned, the one I'd bought for our wedding 8 years ago. The concierge barely glanced at me. In a good suit, with confidence in your step, you can go almost anywhere. Construction work teaches you that too, walk like you belong somewhere, and most people assume you do. I found them in the hotel bar. Corner table, dim lighting, sharing appetizers that probably cost more than most people spend on groceries in a week. Mary was wearing the black dress again, the one I'd never seen in our closet. David was in his expensive suit, leaning forward to catch every word she said. They looked like they were in love. I ordered a beer at the bar, positioned myself where I could watch them without being obvious about it. The bartender was a young guy with tattoos covering his forearms, probably working his way through college. Nice place, I said, making conversation. Yeah, gets busy though. Lots of regulars, you know. Same people, same tables, same drinks every week. Really? Like who? He glanced around, then leaned closer. See that couple in the corner? Been coming in every Tuesday and Thursday for about 2 months. Always order the same thing, she gets white wine, he gets scotch neat. They tip well, so I remember them. 2 months. Mary had been lying to me for 2 months. I finished my beer, left a 20 on the bar, and walked out of the hotel. In the parking garage, I found David's BMW and did something I'd never done before in my life. I let the air out of 2 of his tires. Not slashing them, nothing that would cause permanent damage. Just letting out enough air that he'd have to deal with the inconvenience, call for roadside assistance, explain to Mary why their evening was ending early. It was petty, juvenile, the kind of thing that wouldn't solve anything or change the fundamental problem. But it felt good to take some small action, to exert some measure of control over a situation that had spiraled completely beyond my influence. I was sitting in my truck when they came out of the hotel an hour later. David was on his phone, clearly agitated. Mary stood beside his car, looking confused and frustrated. A hotel security guard was helping them assess the situation. I drove home and went to bed before Mary got there. The next morning, she was quiet over breakfast. Distracted, checking her phone more than usual. Everything okay? I asked. Fine, she said. Just some work stuff. Car trouble last night kept me out later than expected. Car trouble. Not a lie, technically, but not the truth either. I nodded and finished my coffee, watching my wife of 8 years construct a version of reality that protected her secret while insulting my intelligence. That afternoon, Rick called with an update. "Got more photographs from last night," he said. "Also some interesting financial information. Your wife's been spending money on a credit card you probably don't know about. Hotel charges, restaurant bills, shopping trips to stores she's never mentioned." "How much money?" "About $8,000 over the past 2 months. All hidden from the joint accounts you share." $8,000. Money from our savings, our future, our shared life together. Money that was supposed to go toward the kitchen renovation Mary had been wanting, the vacation we talked about taking, the down payment on a bigger house when we were ready to start a family. Instead, she'd spent it on clothes and dinners and hotel rooms with a man who could afford all of those things 10 times over. "There's something else," Rick continued. "David Richardson is married to Rebecca Richardson, daughter of the guy who owns Richardson Development Group. Big construction company, mostly commercial projects. Contracts worth millions." The irony wasn't lost on me. Mary was having an affair with a man whose family business could potentially put mine out of existence if they wanted to compete in the residential market. She was betraying our marriage with someone who represented everything I'd worked against, everything I'd struggled to overcome. "What's your recommendation?" I asked. "Depends what you want. If you're thinking divorce, you've got more than enough evidence. If you want to confront them, I can give you times and locations where they'll be together. If you want to destroy him professionally, I can dig deeper into his business practices, see if there's anything worth exposing." I thought about it for a long time. Revenge fantasies played through my mind, confronting them in the hotel restaurant, sending the photographs to his wife, ruining his reputation in the business community. All of it would feel good for about 5 minutes, and then I'd still be left with the fundamental problem: my marriage was over. "I want them to know that I know," I said finally. "But I want to do it on my terms, in a way that gives me control of the situation." "Understood. What did you have in mind?" I told him my plan. The following Tuesday, I made dinner reservations at the Phoenician Resort Restaurant for 8 p.m. Table for 1, under my own name. I called in sick to the job site, told my foreman I had food poisoning and wouldn't be in for a couple of days. Then I went shopping. At Nordstrom, I bought a new suit. Navy blue, properly tailored, the kind of thing I'd never thought I needed but that transformed how I looked and felt. Dress shirt, silk tie, leather shoes that cost more than most of my power tools. I felt like I was putting on armor, preparing for battle. At 7:30, I drove to the Phoenician and handed my keys to the same valet who'd been parking Mary's car twice a week for 2 months. "Good evening, Mr. Thompson," he said, reading my name from the valet slip. "First time dining with us?" "Something like that," I replied. I walked into the restaurant and was seated at a table with a clear view of Mary and David's usual corner booth. They weren't there yet, but according to Rick's surveillance, they never arrived before 8:15. I ordered a Scotch neat, the same drink David always ordered, and waited. They walked in at 8:18, exactly on schedule. Mary was wearing a red dress I'd never seen before, looking confident and radiant in a way that made my chest tight. David was in his usual expensive suit, hand on her back as the hostess led them to their regular table. They were seated, ordered their usual drinks, and settled into the comfortable rhythm of two people who'd done this many times before. Mary was animated, telling some story that made David laugh. He reached across the table to touch her hand. I waited until they'd finished their appetizers, until they were relaxed and comfortable, until the wine had loosened them up and made them careless. Then I stood up and walked over to their table. Mary, I said, my voice carrying just enough volume that nearby tables could hear. Fancy seeing you here. The color drained from her face. David looked confused, glancing between Mary and me like he was trying to solve a puzzle. James, Mary stammered. What are you? I thought you were working late. Change of plans, I said, pulling out the empty chair at their table and sitting down uninvited. Mind if I join you? I'd love to meet your colleague. Mary's mouth opened and closed without sound. David extended his hand with the kind of confidence that comes from never having been caught doing anything wrong. David Richardson, he said. You must be Mary's husband. She's told me so much about you. I shook his hand, gripping it just a little too firmly, holding eye contact just a little too long. Has she? That's interesting, because she's never mentioned you at all. The silence that followed was deafening. Mary stared at her wine glass. David's confidence began to crack around the edges. I think there might be some confusion, David said carefully. No confusion, I replied. Mary's been telling me she's working late twice a week for the past 2 months. Turns out she's been working late with you, in this hotel, spending money from our joint savings account on dinners and clothes and whatever else you two have been doing. Mary finally found her voice. James, please. Not here. We can talk about this at home. We can talk about it right here, I said, my voice steady and calm. In front of David, who apparently knows you well enough to have opinions about our marriage but not well enough to know that adultery has consequences. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a manila envelope, placing it on the table between the wine glasses and appetizer plates. These are photographs, I said. Dates, times, locations. 2 months' worth of documentation showing exactly what Mary's been doing during her late nights at work. There's also financial records showing $8,000 in unauthorized spending, and a complete background check on you, David, including your wife's name, your children's schools, and your business address. David's face went pale. What do you want? I want you to understand that your little romance has consequences, I said. For both of you. Mary, you can explain to your family why our marriage is ending. David, you can explain to your wife why your name is about to be associated with a very public divorce proceeding. I stood up, straightened my tie, and looked down at both of them. Enjoy your dinner, I said. It's the last one you'll be having together. I walked out of the restaurant, through the lobby, and handed my valet slip to the same young man who'd been watching this drama unfold twice a week for 2 months. Have a good evening, sir, he said. I intend to, I replied. Mary came home 3 hours later. I was sitting on the couch with Rex, watching the late news, drinking a beer like it was any other Tuesday night. We need to talk, she said. No, I replied without looking away from the television. We needed to talk 2 months ago, before you started lying to me. Now we need to figure out logistics. James, please. It's not what you think. I muted the TV and turned to face her. It's exactly what I think. You've been having an affair with David Richardson for 2 months. You've been lying to me about working late, spending our money on clothes and dinners to impress another man, and constructing an elaborate deception to hide the fact that you've checked out of our marriage. Mary sat down in the chair across from me, tears starting to form in her eyes. I never meant for it to happen. But it did happen. And you kept making it happen, twice a week, for 2 months. You made a choice, Mary. Every time you lied about working late, every time you spent our money on him, every time you came home and kissed me while smelling like his cologne, you made a choice. What happens now? She asked. Now you move out. Tonight. Go stay with your sister, or go stay with David, or go stay in a hotel. I don't care where you go, but you don't sleep in this house anymore. And then we get divorced. You can have your lawyer call my lawyer. We'll divide everything according to Arizona law, minus the $8,000 you stole from our savings account, plus whatever damages my attorney thinks we can recover for adultery and fraud. Mary wiped her eyes, smearing mascara across her cheek. I'm sorry, James. I really am. I know, I said. But sorry doesn't rebuild trust. Sorry doesn't erase 2 months of lies. Sorry doesn't make me forget the sight of you laughing with another man in a hotel restaurant while I thought you were working late to build our future together. She went upstairs to pack a bag. I sat on the couch with Rex, listening to drawers opening and closing, hangers moving in the closet, the sound of my marriage ending one piece of clothing at a time. When she came back downstairs with her suitcase, she stopped at the front door. For what it's worth, she said, you handled this with more class than I deserved. I handled it the way my father taught me to handle problems, I replied. With preparation, patience, and decisive action when the time comes. After her car pulled out of the driveway, I called Rick Martinez. It's done, I said. She's moving out tonight. How do you feel? I thought about it. Like I just demolished a building that was structurally unsound. Necessary, but not pleasant. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. Mary got half of everything we'd built together, minus the money she'd spent on her affair, minus the additional $12,000 my attorney was able to recover for emotional distress and fraudulent spending. David Richardson's wife filed for divorce 2 weeks after I confronted them at the hotel. Apparently, I wasn't the only one who believed in consequences for adultery. Mary moved to California with some money from the settlement. I heard she got a job at an advertising agency in Los Angeles, started over somewhere nobody knew about her brief career as an unfaithful wife. As for me, I kept the house, kept the business, kept Rex. I renovated the kitchen Mary had wanted, using the money she'd stolen and then returned through legal proceedings. Every time I cooked dinner in that kitchen, I remember that sometimes justice takes time, but it always comes. 6 months after the divorce was final, I was having coffee at a diner near one of my job sites when a woman at the next table started talking to Rex, who was waiting patiently beside my truck in the parking lot. Her name was Sarah. She was a veterinarian, recently moved to Phoenix from Colorado, looking for someone to help her fence a yard for the animal rescue she was starting. I could do that, I said. Build you something solid that'll last. She smiled. That's exactly what I need. Something solid that'll last. We've been together for 8 months now. She knows about Mary, about the affair, about how my previous marriage ended. She says it makes her respect me more, not less, knowing that I handled betrayal with strength instead of bitterness. You didn't let it break you, she said one evening as we watched the sunset from her back porch. You let it make you stronger. My father used to say that problems are just opportunities to prove what you're made of, I replied. Turns out I'm made of stronger stuff than I thought. Last week, I saw David Richardson at a gas station. He was driving a smaller car, wearing clothes that looked off the rack instead of custom-tailored. His divorce had been more expensive than mine, bigger house, more assets, alimony payments that would last for years. He saw me too, started to say something, then thought better of it and looked away. I didn't gloat. Didn't say anything. Just finished filling my tank and drove away. Some battles you win by fighting. Others you win by being strong enough to walk away when walking away is the right thing to do. These days, I sleep well at night. I've got a business that's growing, a woman who respects me, a dog who's loyal, and a house that's truly mine. I've got the satisfaction of knowing that when my world fell apart, I didn't fall apart with it. I built something better instead. That's what real men do. We don't just endure betrayal, we transform it into strength. We don't just survive deception, we use it to build better judgment. We don't just get through hard times, we come out the other side as better versions of ourselves. Mary thought she could lie to me for 2 months, steal from our future, and destroy our marriage without consequences. She was wrong about that, just like she was wrong about what kind of man she married. I'm the kind of man who prepares for problems, faces them head-on when they come, and builds something stronger from whatever pieces are left. I'm the kind of man who finishes what he starts.